My sister told me to stop playing pretend entrepreneur. That afternoon, I sent an email making $150 million vanish from her company. To our parents, she is the genius, and I am just a freelancer in a hoodie. They have no idea the silent partner holding veto power is me. In 5 days, she will sit trembling in a boardroom, reading my name on the document that proves I own 51% of her life. My name is Olivia Campbell. I am 29 years old, and if you saw me walking down the street of this mid-sized East Coast city, you would probably assume I am struggling to make rent. I drive a 10-year-old sedan with a muffler that rattles every time I hit 40 miles per hour. My wardrobe consists almost entirely of oversized gray hoodies and jeans that have been washed so many times the denim is turning white at the knees. I buy my coffee from the gas station, not the artisanal roaster downtown, and I have never posted a photo of my workspace on Instagram with a motivational caption. To my neighbors, I am just the quiet girl in apartment 4B who types on her computer all day and probably does data entry or technical support. To my parents, I am the daughter who failed to launch, the one who lacks the spark, the charisma, and the drive that defines the Campbell bloodline. They love me, of course, but they love me with a sigh, the kind of love that is heavy with lowered expectations. They worry about my future because they look at my exterior and see stagnation. They do not see the bank accounts. They do not see the diversified portfolio. They certainly do not see that I could buy the entire apartment complex we are standing in with a single wire transfer if I felt like dealing with the property taxes. It has always been this way. The dichotomy was established before I could even tie my own shoes. There was Lauren, and then there was me. Lauren Blake, my sister, is 4 years older than me. From the moment she entered kindergarten, she was a star. She was the kind of child who did not just participate. She dominated. She was the captain of the debate team, the student body president, and the homecoming queen. Her face was not just in the yearbook. It was framed on the walls of the school hallways. She had a smile that could disarm a traffic cop and a handshake that made grown men nod in approval. She was electric. She was loud. She was everything our parents wanted in a legacy. I was just Olivia. While Lauren was practicing her acceptance speeches in the mirror, I was dismantling the television remote to see how the infrared sensor worked, while she was organizing charity galas and networking with the local Rotary Club at age 16. I was sitting in the dark, bathed in the blue light of a bulky CRT monitor, teaching myself how to write code. My parents, God bless them, tried to understand me, but they always filtered my existence through the lens of my sister. They would look at Lauren and say she had leadership potential. They would look at me and say, I was good with machines. It sounds like a compliment, but in the Campbell household, it was a ceiling. I remember the specific texture of the air in our living room when I was 10 years old. It was a Tuesday evening. The house smelled of pot roast and lemon polish. Lauren had just come home with a trophy from the state debate championship. It was gold plastic, a little figure standing on a marble base, holding a wreath of victory. My father placed it on the mantel, right next to her spelling bee trophy and her youth leadership award. Look at that, my father had said, his voice thick with pride. That is how you command a room. Lauren, you have a gift. You can sell ice to an Eskimo. You are going to run the world one day. My mother had beamed, pouring sparkling cider into fancy glasses. It was a celebration. It was always a celebration for Lauren. That same night, I was in the garage. It was freezing, and the concrete floor seeped cold through my socks. I had spent 3 months scavenging parts. I had taken a motherboard from a dead desktop the school was throwing away. I had found a stick of RAM at a yard sale for $2. I had a power supply that I was 90% sure would not explode. I was building my first computer. I did not have a case, so I had mounted everything inside a cardboard box I had reinforced with duct tape. When I finally pressed the power button, a switch I had salvaged from an old lamp, the fan whirred to life. It was a jagged, noisy sound, but to me, it was a symphony. The screen flickered, and then, white text appeared on the black background. It was alive. I had created something from nothing. I had made the chaos of electricity obey my command. I ran inside. my hands covered in dust and thermal paste, desperate to share this victory. I wanted my moment on the mantel. "Mom, Dad, come look," I had shouted, bursting into the dining room where they were still admiring Lauren's trophy. "I made it work. The computer is running." My mother had turned, her face falling when she saw my dirty hands. "Olivia, look at you." She had sighed. "You are getting grease all over the carpet. Go wash up." "But I built it. I insisted. I built a computer." My father had glanced toward the garage door, not with pride, but with mild annoyance. "Just do not break anything. Olivia," he had said, turning back to Lauren, "and do not use up all the electricity. We do not need you blowing a fuse while we are celebrating your sister." I went back to the garage and sat on the cold floor next to my cardboard computer. I watched the cursor blink on the screen. Blink, blink, blink. It was steady. It was reliable. It did not care that I was dirty. It did not care that I was not a debate champion. It just waited for my input. That was the night I realized that machines were better listeners than people. Machines were fair. If you wrote the code correctly, the machine did what you asked. It did not play favorites. As we grew older, the divide widened. By the time I was 15, I was making more money than most of the seniors in my high school. Though nobody knew it, I had started picking up freelance work on forums that no longer exist. I fixed broken HTML for local businesses. I removed viruses from the laptops of my parents' friends. I set up simple networks for small offices. I would come home with $300 in cash tucked into my pocket. Feeling a surge of triumph, I wanted to show them. I wanted to prove that my quiet tinkering was actually a career. But whenever I tried to bring it up, it was dismissed. "It is good that you are earning a little pocket money. Olivia," my mother would say, patting my hand patronizingly, "it teaches you responsibility. Just do not let it distract you from your schoolwork. You need to keep your grades up if you want to get into a decent college. Maybe you can be a technician or work in IT support. Those are steady jobs. Pocket money. They called it pocket money." Meanwhile, Lauren was 18 and talking about changing the paradigm of the technology industry. She did not know how to restart a router, but she knew how to use words like scalability and market penetration. Lauren would sit at the dinner table, pushing her peas around with a fork, and declare her intentions. "I do not want to just work in tech," she would say, her eyes bright with unearned confidence. "I want to shape it. I want to be on the strategy side. That is where the real power is. Engineers are a dime a dozen. You can hire anyone to write code. But vision, you cannot teach vision." My father would nod vigorously, chewing his steak. "Exactly," he would agree. "You are management material. Lauren, you look at the big picture. Olivia likes the weeds. She is happy in the weeds. But someone has to tell the weed pullers where to start." I would sit there, gripping my fork until my knuckles turned white. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell them that the weeds were where the actual work happened. I wanted to say that without the engineers, Lauren's vision was just a hallucination, but I never did. I was the introvert. I was the quiet one. I was the one who supposedly lacked the communication skills to argue my case. So I stopped trying to explain. I stopped showing them my paychecks. I stopped talking about the complex database I had structured for the local library or the security flaw I had found in the school district's server. I realized that explaining my world to them was like trying to explain color to a dog. They just did not have the spectrum for it. I developed a mantra during those long, suffocating dinners. I would repeat it in my head while Lauren droned on about her leadership seminar. Code does not need an audience. Server understands. That is enough. It became my shield. I convinced myself that I did not want the spotlight. The spotlight burned. The spotlight made you perform. In the shadows, I could actually build things. I could be powerful without being seen. I took a strange, masochistic pride in being the underdog in my own house. I told myself it was making me tougher. It was making me self-reliant. But deep down, beneath the layers of cynicism and logic, it hurt. It hurt to be looked at with pity when I knew I was capable of greatness. It hurt to see my father look at Lauren with a mixture of awe and respect, and then look at me with a mixture of concern and confusion. They thought I was lost. They thought I was drifting. The ultimate crystallization of this dynamic happened on the day of Lauren's high school graduation. It was a sweltering June afternoon. The school gymnasium was packed with families fanning themselves with programs. The air smelled of floor wax and cheap perfume. When they called Lauren's name, the applause was thunderous. She walked across the stage with that perfect, practiced gait, her chin held high. She accepted her diploma, shook the principal's hand, and flashed a smile that seemed to catch the light of the camera flashes. She was the valedictorian. She had just given a speech about daring to dream and breaking glass ceilings. My parents were on their feet. My father was whistling. Two sharp bursts of sound that cut through the cheering. My mother was wiping tears from her eyes, clutching my arm. "Look at her." "Olivia," my mother whispered, her voice trembling. "Just look at her. She's going to do amazing things." I was standing a few feet behind them. I had been assigned the duty of holding the heavy camcorder, tasked with documenting Lauren's glory. My arms ached from holding the device steady for 2 hours, but I was multitasking. Propped open on a folding chair next to me, half hidden by my mother's oversized purse, was my battered laptop. I had a script running. It was a simple bot I had written to automate ticket purchases for a concert that was going to sell out in seconds. I was not going to the concert. I was going to resell the tickets. It was a small hustle, a way to turn $500 into $2,000 in less than an hour. Through the viewfinder of the camera, I watched Lauren raise her diploma to the sky. She looked like a queen being coronated. The crowd roared. I glanced down at my laptop screen. The terminal window was scrolling rapidly with green text. Processing request. Success. Tickets acquired. Transaction complete. I had just made more money in 30 seconds than my father made in a week. I looked back up at the stage. Lauren was blowing kisses to the crowd. Everyone saw her success. It was loud. It was public. It was validated by applause and parchment. My success was silent. It was a few lines of code executed in the dark. It was a number in a database changing value. Nobody clapped for me. Nobody wiped a tear for me. I zoomed in on Lauren's face in the viewfinder. She looked radiant. She looked like she owned the world. "Good for you." "Lauren," I whispered, my voice lost in the cheering. "Enjoy the applause." I closed my laptop and slid it into my backpack. I felt a cold, hard knot forming in my stomach. It was a feeling I would carry with me for the next decade. It was the realization that in this family, perception was the only reality that mattered. And if I wanted to survive, if I wanted to win, I would have to play a game they did not even know existed. I kept filming. I kept the frame steady. But behind the lens, my eyes were dry, and my mind was already calculating the next move. They thought I was just the little sister with the computer. They thought I was the spectator. They had no idea that I was already building the stage they were all standing on. The acceptance letter from Weston Business School arrived in a thick, cream-colored envelope that felt like it weighed more than my future. When Lauren tore it open at the kitchen table, revealing the embossed gold crest and the dean's signature in actual ink, my mother screamed loud enough to startle the neighbor's dogs. My father immediately went to the liquor cabinet and pulled out the bottle of 20-year-old scotch he had been saving for a moment worthy of the Campbell name. Weston was not just a university, it was a kingdom. It was where senators sent their sons, and where Fortune 500 CEOs sent their daughters to learn the secret handshakes of the ruling class. The tuition was $45,000 a semester, not including room, board, and the mandatory social budget required to keep up with peers who flew private jets to Aspen for the weekend. My parents did not blink at the cost. They called it an investment. They called it securing the legacy. 2 weeks later, my acceptance letter from the state university arrived in a thin, standard business envelope. I had chosen state for one reason. Their computer science department was a grinding, unglamorous factory that churned out the best back-end engineers in the country. The campus was a sprawling maze of brutalist concrete buildings that smelled like old coffee and floor wax. The tuition was $6,000 a semester. When I showed the letter to my father, he glanced at it over the top of his newspaper. gave a tight, polite nod, and said, "Well, that is a sensible choice. Olivia, it will be good for you to have a trade to fall back on. A trade, like I was learning to fix sinks." That was the moment the road forked. Lauren packed her bags with designer blazers and networking guides. I packed mine with a soldering iron and a tower PC I had upgraded with money earned from fixing cracked iPhone screens. My parents paid every cent of Lauren's tuition, housing, and sorority dues. For me, they offered to cover the first year of dorm costs. But I declined. I told them I wanted to handle it. They looked relieved. They assumed I would take out student loans. They did not know that by my freshman year, I was already generating $3,000 a month maintaining legacy databases for a chain of dry cleaners across the tri-state area. College life for Lauren was a series of high-gloss snapshots. She came home for Thanksgiving break of her freshman year, looking like a different species. She had cut her hair into a sharp, aggressive bob. She wore a watch that cost more than my car. At the dinner table, she did not speak. She held court. She talked about case studies. She threw around names of professors who had served on the Federal Reserve Board. She used words like synergy and leverage and pain points. "I met a guy last week whose father runs a venture capital fund in Palo Alto," Lauren said, stabbing a piece of turkey with precision. "We were discussing the valuation of social media derivatives. It is fascinating how the market prices intangible assets." My mother leaned forward, her chin resting on her hand, entranced. "That sounds incredibly complex." "Honey," she said, "you really have a head for the big picture." Then, inevitably, the spotlight would shift to me, dimmer and cooler. "And how is school for you?" "Olivia," my father asked, pouring more wine for Lauren. Still messing around with the computers, I swallowed a bite of stuffing that suddenly felt like dry sawdust. "I am studying data structures and algorithms." "Dad," I said, "I actually just finished a project where we built a compiler from scratch." My father blinked. "Right," he said, "fixing computers. That is good. People will always need someone to help them when their printer jams." I wanted to correct him. I wanted to tell him that I was not learning how to unjam paper trays. I was learning the logic that governed the modern world. I wanted to tell him that the previous night, while Lauren was discussing derivatives at a mixer, I had written a script that automated the inventory tracking for a local auto parts supplier, saving them 20 hours of manual labor a week, and they had paid me $4,000 for it. But I looked at their faces. They were not listening to understand. They were listening to be polite. To them, my world was blue-collar work performed in a white-collar setting. It was manual labor for the digital age. The contrast sharpened as the years went by. By her junior year, Lauren was the president of the Future Business Leaders Association at Weston. She posted photos on Facebook of herself at galas, wearing floor-length gowns, holding flutes of champagne, standing next to men in tuxedos who looked like they were born wearing cufflinks. The captions were always breathless and filled with buzzwords. Connecting with future disruptors, building the network, the hustle never stops. Meanwhile, I was living in a cheap off-campus apartment that smelled permanently of ramen noodles and ozone. But inside my room, I was building an empire of invisible efficiency. I had moved beyond local businesses. I was picking up remote contracts from companies in California and Texas. I was building APIs for logistics firms. I was patching security holes for mid-sized e-commerce sites. I was making $70,000 a year while taking a full course load. And I had not even graduated yet. But I never bought new clothes. I kept driving the rattling sedan. I kept the narrative intact. If I showed up in a new car, my parents would ask where the money came from. If I told them I earned it coding, they would dismiss it as luck or a fluke. Or worse, they would tell Lauren, and she would find a way to diminish it. So I hoarded the money. I watched the numbers in my savings account tick upward like a high score in a video game that only I was playing. The tension came to a head during the summer before our senior years. We were all sitting on the patio, enjoying a barbecue. Lauren was interning at a boutique consulting firm in Manhattan. She was talking about a pitch deck she had helped refine. "It is all about the narrative," Lauren declared, waving a skewer of grilled shrimp. "The technology does not matter. You can outsource the tech to India or Eastern Europe for pennies. The real value is in the brand, the market positioning, and the capital structure. That is where the ownership lives. She looked at me then, a pitying smile on her lips. No offense, Olivia, she added. I know you love your coding, but ultimately, code is just a commodity. It is a utility, like electricity. The people who run the power plant are the ones who matter, not the electrician who comes to fix the outlet. I felt a flush of heat climb up my neck. The electrician is the only one who knows how to keep the lights on, I said, keeping my voice steady. If the grid goes down, the guy with the power plant deed is just standing in the dark holding a piece of paper. Lauren laughed. It was a light, tinkling sound that made me want to throw my plate into the bushes. That is a very cute way to look at it, she said. But in the real world, the person with the capital hires the electrician. And if the electrician gives them attitude, they fire him and hire another one. That is why I am in business school. I want to be the one doing the hiring. My father pointed his fork at Lauren. She is right. Olivia, he said, you listen to your sister. She sounds just like those analysts on CNBC. She understands how the world works. You could learn a lot from her about ambition. I looked down at my plate. I had just closed a contract that morning worth $15,000 to overhaul a legacy database for a regional hospital system. $15,000. Lauren's unpaid internship gave her a subway stipend. But in my father's eyes, she was the titan of industry, and I was the help. It was during that same summer that I first heard the phrase. Lauren was scrolling through her phone, frowning at a post from a high school friend of ours, a girl named Sarah, who had started a small business making custom candles and selling them on Etsy. Sarah was posting about her struggles with shipping costs and late nights packing boxes. Look at this, Lauren sneered. Showing the phone to my mother, Sarah thinks she is a CEO because she melted some wax in her kitchen. It is so embarrassing. My mother glanced at the screen and tutted. Well, at least she is trying, my mother said weakly. She is not trying, Lauren snapped. She is playing pretend entrepreneur. She has no scalability. She has no burn rate analysis. She is just trading her time for pennies and calling it a business. It is insulting to people who actually build companies. Pretend entrepreneur. The words hung in the humid summer air like a toxic cloud. I watched Lauren swipe past Sarah's photo with a dismissive flick of her thumb. I saw the disdain in her eyes, the absolute certainty that her path, the path of slide decks and boardrooms, was the only legitimate definition of success. I looked at my sister, really looked at her. I saw the fear behind the arrogance. She needed to believe that everyone else was pretending so that she could feel real. She needed the barrier to entry to be high, so that her expensive education meant something. I did not say anything. I went to my room and opened my laptop. I logged into my bank account. The balance was sitting at 6 figures. It was a number that would have made my father choke on his steak. I switched tabs to check the status of a server migration I was running for a client in Denver. The terminal was a wall of green text, flowing smoothly, error-free. I thought about Sarah and her candles. I thought about myself and my code. And then I thought about Lauren and her buzzwords. Lauren believed that business was about the performance of business. She thought it was about the suit, the title, and the handshake. She did not understand that business, at its core, was simply value in exchange for money. I checked my email. A client had just sent a thank you note. Olivia, the new script cut our processing time by 40%. You are a lifesaver. Invoice approved for payment. I smiled, a small, cold curving of my lips that nobody saw. I clicked over to Instagram. Lauren had posted a new story 10 minutes ago. She was at a rooftop bar in Manhattan, holding a martini. The caption read, "Views from the top. Manifesting empire." She was manifesting. I was executing. I closed the laptop. I knew something then that Lauren would not learn for years. Maybe never. I knew that the person who controls the system controls the outcome. Lauren wanted to be the face on the magazine cover. I was content to be the ink that printed the page. Same business. I whispered to the empty room. One has lights. one does not. But the one in the dark is the one holding the switch. I went to sleep that night with a calmness that terrified me. I realized I did not need them to understand. In fact, their ignorance was my greatest asset. As long as they thought I was just fixing computers, they would never see me coming, and when I finally arrived, it would be too late for them to do anything but watch. The ink on Lauren's diploma from Weston Business School was barely dry when Skyloop Labs was born. It was not just a company. It was, in her words, a movement. She pitched it as a revolutionary software-as-a-service platform that would redefine the remote work experience by integrating project management with emotional intelligence metrics. To me, it looked like a calendar app with a mood ring attached to it, but I kept that observation to myself. The launch of Skyloop Labs was treated by the Campbell family not as a business venture, but as a royal decree. It was the culmination of every debate trophy, every student council presidency, and every overpriced semester at Weston. It was the moment the prophecy was supposed to be fulfilled. To fund this prophecy, my parents did something that made my stomach turn. They sat down at the kitchen table one Tuesday evening, surrounded by brochures and printed spreadsheets Lauren had prepared, and they decided to liquidate a significant portion of their stock portfolio. They cashed out bonds that had been maturing since the 90s. My father even spoke, with a trembling sort of pride, about dipping into his 401k penalty-free because he was over 59 and a half. "We are not spending money." "Mom," Lauren said, holding my mother's hand across the table, "we are investing in the family legacy. When Skyloop goes public, this initial buy-in will be worth 20 times what it is today. You are getting in on the ground floor." I sat at the end of the table, silent. I knew the math. I knew that 90% of startups failed within the first 3 years. I knew that putting retirement money into a seed round for a first-time founder was financial suicide, but I also knew that if I spoke up, I would be the jealous sister. I would be the pessimist raining on the parade. So I watched my father write a check for $75,000. Then my mother wrote one for $50,000 from an inheritance she had been saving. $125,000 of family money, gone in 2 strokes of a pen. 3 weeks later, the local business journal ran a feature story. The headline was bold and breathless: "Young entrepreneur from Weston leads new startup wave in the city." The photo took up half the page. There was Lauren, standing in front of an exposed brick wall in the co-working space she had rented, wearing a sharp white blazer and a smile that radiated confidence. Behind her stood her 2 co-founders, a guy named Brad, who handled marketing, and a girl named Jessica, who was technically the chief operations officer, but mostly just managed the Instagram account. I stared at the newspaper, feeling a strange, cold sensation in my chest. I knew that brick wall. I knew exactly when that photo was taken because I had been standing right there. On the day of the photo shoot, Lauren had called me in a panic because the demo version of the software kept crashing on the tablet she needed to hold for the picture. I had driven over, spent 40 minutes debugging a memory leak in their shoddily outsourced code, and got the system stable enough to display the logo without freezing. When the photographer arrived, Lauren had waved me over. "Come stand with us." "Olivia," she had said, "you helped set this up." I had stood on the far left, awkwardly holding my backpack, feeling out of place in my flannel shirt next to their business casual attire. The photographer had snapped a dozen frames, but in the version that made it to print, the frame ended at Brad's shoulder. I had been cropped out. I was physically erased from the narrative. The caption listed the names of the founding team, and mine was nowhere to be found. I remember showing the paper to my mother. "Look at this photo," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "Oh, isn't it stunning?" she gushed, taping it to the refrigerator right over a calendar. "She looks so professional. You can just tell she is in charge." She did not even notice I was missing. Or maybe she assumed I was never meant to be there in the first place. The official launch party for Skyloop Labs was held at a trendy downtown gallery that cost $4,000 to rent for the night. There were servers passing around hors d'oeuvres that were too small to taste, and a DJ playing ambient electronic music that was supposed to sound like innovation. The room was filled with friends of the family, local business owners, and a few angel investors Lauren had managed to charm. My parents were holding court near the bar. Beaming so hard their faces must have hurt. I spent the first hour of the party in the corner, hidden behind a large potted fern, with my laptop balanced on a cocktail table. Lauren had asked me to monitor the live server during her keynote presentation. Just keep an eye on it. Olivia, she had whispered to me before the guests arrived. If it crashes while I'm projecting the dashboard, I am dead. Just do your computer magic if anything goes wrong. So while Lauren stood on the small stage, illuminated by a spotlight, holding a microphone with the ease of a talk show host, I was watching a terminal window. We are not just building software, Lauren announced to the hushed crowd. We are building a bridge between productivity and humanity. Skyloop is the future of how we connect. The crowd applauded. My father wiped a tear from his eye. On my screen, a red warning line flashed. The server load was spiking because the marketing team had accidentally triggered an email blast at the exact same moment as the demo. The latency was climbing. 500 milliseconds, 800 milliseconds. If it hit 1,000, the dashboard on the big screen behind Lauren would freeze. I started typing furiously, rerouting the traffic through a backup load balancer I had set up secretly because I knew their primary architecture was garbage. My fingers flew across the keys. I was not listening to the speech. I was listening to the hum of the fan in my laptop and the rhythm of the code. 900 milliseconds. I hit enter. The latency dropped instantly. 200 milliseconds. Green text. Stable. On stage. Lauren swiped across the tablet, and the screen behind her responded instantly. Silky smooth. See, she said, smiling at the audience. Seamless integration. The room erupted in applause. My mother clapped so hard her bracelets jingled. Lauren bowed. I let out a breath I did not know I was holding and closed my laptop. I had just saved the entire night, and nobody in the room knew it. Later, during the mingling portion of the evening, my Uncle Robert cornered me near the buffet. Uncle Robert was a nice man who sold insurance and measured success by the size of a person's lawn. Great party, isn't it? He asked, gesturing with a skewer of chicken sauté. Lauren really has the magic touch. Who knew we had a CEO in the family? Yeah, she is doing great, I said, taking a sip of lukewarm soda. And what are you up to these days? Olivia, he asked, looking at me with that distinct mixture of kindness and pity, reserved for the less successful sibling. Still playing around with the computers, I felt a flash of irritation. I was 25 years old. I was not playing. I am actually running a software consulting firm. I said, I help enterprise clients optimize their back-end infrastructure. Uncle Robert blinked, his eyes glazing over slightly. Oh, consulting, he said, nodding slowly. That is nice. It is good to have steady work. You know, not everyone is cut out for the high-stakes world like your sister. It is good you found something stable. As long as you are happy, that is what matters. Stable. Happy. The words felt like pats on the head. He did not ask who my clients were. He did not ask about my revenue. He assumed I was fixing printers for $20 an hour. I forced a smile. Thanks, Uncle Robert. I am very happy. I excused myself and walked toward the bathroom, needing a moment of silence. As I passed the VIP booth where Lauren was sitting with my parents and a few potential investors, I heard my name. Well, Olivia is great with the technical details, Lauren was saying, her voice carrying over the music. She is a wizard with code. But to really run a business, you need a different skill set. You need to understand the market. She is very introverted. She is happier in the background. Investors want to see a strong leadership team, not just engineers. My father nodded in agreement. Olivia is a support player, he said, and every team needs support players. We are very proud of her for finding her niche. I froze. A support player, happier in the background. They were not just ignoring my success, they were actively rewriting my personality to fit their narrative. In their story, Lauren was the hero, and I was the NPC, the non-player character who exists solely to hand the hero a tool when they need it. I did not go into the bathroom. I walked out the back door into the cool night air. I stood in the alley behind the gallery, next to the dumpsters, and pulled out my phone. I had an email notification. It was from the state registry. Subject: Incorporation documents approved. Nova Grid Systems, LLC. I stared at the screen, while Lauren was popping champagne inside and burning through our parents' retirement fund to rent a venue. I had officially incorporated my own company, Nova Grid Systems. It was not a startup. It was not a laboratory. It was a grid, a system, something essential, something that ran underneath the surface. I was not building an app to track moods. I was building middleware for logistics chains. I was building automated compliance checkers for fintech. I was building the plumbing that the digital world flushed its trillions of dollars through. I did not need a launch party. I did not need a feature in the local paper. I looked back at the closed door of the gallery. I could hear the muffled bass of the music and the laughter of my family. They were celebrating a facade. "Okay," I whispered to the empty alley. "You want me in the background, I will be in the background. But you are going to learn that the background is where the gravity comes from." The next 6 months were a study in contrast. Skyloop Labs burned through cash like it was kindling. Lauren hired a social media manager, a community manager, and a chief vibe officer before she hired a second back-end engineer. They renovated an old warehouse into a loft office with beanbag chairs and a kombucha tap. I visited once to drop off some paperwork for my parents. Lauren gave me a tour, pointing out the neon sign that said, "Hustle harder" on the wall. It is all about culture. Olivia, she told me, walking past a row of empty desks that were waiting for employees she could not afford yet. You have to build the culture before you build the product. I nodded, biting my tongue. In my head, I was calculating their burn rate based on the square footage and the visible equipment. They were bleeding $20,000 a month. Easy. Meanwhile, Nova Grid Systems was operating out of my spare bedroom. My overhead was the cost of internet and electricity. My staff was me and 2 contractors I hired in Eastern Europe to handle routine QA testing. But my revenue was climbing vertically. I had secured a contract with a regional shipping coordinator that needed to integrate their legacy tracking system with a new cloud API. It was boring, unsexy work. It involved parsing thousands of lines of spaghetti code from the 90s. Lauren would have turned up her nose at it. She would have said it wasn't disruptive. I charged them $85,000 for a 6-week project. They paid it without blinking. I did not tell my parents. When I went over for Sunday dinner, I listened to them gush about Lauren's potential seed round. "She is talking to investors from Boston," my mother said, serving the pot roast. "Real venture capitalists. They say Skyloop could be the next Slack." "That is amazing," I said, cutting my meat. "And how is your work going?" Dear Mom asked as an afterthought. "Still doing the consulting." "Yes," I said. "Still doing the consulting." I did not tell her that I had just incorporated a holding company to manage my tax liability because Nova Grid was projecting to break $250,000 in profit that year. I did not tell her that I was looking at buying a duplex in the city with cash. I let them have their story. The climax of this era of willful blindness came on a rainy Tuesday night. I was at my parents' house for dinner. The television was on in the living room, tuned to the local news. Suddenly, the anchor's voice shifted to an upbeat tone. And in local business news, Skyloop Labs, founded by local prodigy Lauren Blake, has announced they are seeking a seed round valuation of $5 million. We sat down with Blake to discuss the future of work. My father jumped up from his recliner. Turn it up, he shouted. We all gathered around the TV. There was Lauren, sitting in her office, the neon "Hustle Harder" sign glowing pink behind her head. She was talking about synergy and the gig economy. She looked polished. She looked successful. My mother was clutching her chest. "Oh, look at her," she whispered. "She is a star, a real star." I sat on the sofa armrest. My laptop balanced on my knees. I was not watching the TV. I was reading a PDF document that had just landed in my secure inbox. It was a master service agreement. The client was a defense logistics subsidiary, a massive corporation that moved parts for airplanes across the globe. They needed a proprietary encryption layer for their internal communications. They had vetted Nova Grid for 3 months. I scrolled to the bottom of the document. Total contract value, $450,000. Duration, 8 months. My mother turned to me, her eyes shining with tears of joy for Lauren. Can you believe it, Olivia? Your sister is going to change the world. I looked at the TV, where Lauren was smiling her winning smile, asking the world for money she had not earned. Then I looked down at my screen, where the signature line waited for me. I typed my name, Olivia Campbell, CEO, Nova Grid Systems. I hit execute. The document uploaded. The contract was live. I had just made nearly $500,000 while sitting in my parents' living room, and they were too busy watching a fluff piece about a company that had not made a single dollar of profit to notice. It is incredible. Mom, I said, closing my laptop with a soft click. She really is something else. I stood up and picked up my car keys. Where are you going? My father asked, not looking away from the screen. The segment isn't over. I have to get back. I said, I have an early morning. Just a little more consulting work, he asked dismissively. Something like that. I said. I walked out into the rain, got into my rattling sedan, and drove home. As I merged onto the highway, I let out a laugh that sounded a little too sharp in the quiet car. They wanted a star. They got one. They just did not realize they were staring at a reflection while the real sun was burning right next to them. And the thing about stars eventually, gravity pulls everything into their orbit. Even the people who refuse to look up. Nova Grid Systems did not just grow, it metastasized. By the time Skyloop Labs was burning through its first seed round on office furniture and branding consultants, my company had become the invisible backbone for 3 of the largest logistics networks in North America. We were not building flashy apps for consumers. We were building the boring, unsexy, critical infrastructure that made sure packages arrived on time and bank transfers did not vanish into the ether. My reputation in the industry had shifted. I was no longer the freelancer looking for scraps. I was the entity you called when your 9-figure digital transformation project was about to implode. This reputation opened doors that were usually locked to people who wore hoodies. One of those doors belonged to Summit Bridge Ventures, a top-tier venture capital firm with offices that looked more like art museums than workplaces. They had hired Nova Grid to perform technical due diligence on their potential investments. Essentially, they paid me an exorbitant retainer to look under the hood of tech startups and tell them if the engine was a Ferrari or a hamster on a wheel. It was a Tuesday morning in late October when I walked into the Summit Bridge conference room. The air smelled of espresso and expensive leather. The managing partner, a man named Marcus with a handshake like a vice, slid a thick dossier across the mahogany table. We need your eyes on this one, Olivia, Marcus said. The valuation is high, and the pitch is compelling, but our analysts are worried the tech stack is smoke and mirrors. I opened the folder. The logo on the first page hit me like a physical blow. Skyloop Labs. I stared at the page. My heart did a strange, painful flip in my chest. I kept my face completely impassive. I had practiced this face during 1,000 family dinners. I flipped through the summary. It was brutal. The business analysts at Summit Bridge had praised the charismatic leadership and strong market positioning that was Lauren, but the technical notes were a slaughterhouse. Proprietary algorithm appears to be standard open-source libraries glued together. Server architecture is non-scalable. User data security protocols are 3 years out of date. Conclusion, high risk. Product is currently marketing vaporware. I closed the folder and looked at Marcus. You want my honest assessment, I asked. Always, he said. The leadership is excellent at selling a vision, I said, choosing my words with surgical precision. But the product cannot support the weight of that vision. If you invest now, you are buying a very expensive marketing campaign for a product that does not actually work yet. Marcus nodded, looking disappointed. That is what I feared. We will probably pass. Wait, I said. The word came out before I could stop it. My brain was racing. I was furious at Lauren for her arrogance, for the way she dismissed me, for the way she was gambling with our parents' money. But looking at that dossier, seeing the inevitable crash that was coming, I felt a twist of something else. If Summit Bridge passed, Skyloop would likely collapse within 6 months. My parents would lose their retirement funds. Lauren would be publicly humiliated. And as much as I hated the way she treated me, the thought of my family being destitute did not sit well with me. I had the power to stop the bleeding. I had the power to catch them, but I was not going to just catch them. I was going to own them. There is another option, I said, leaning back in my chair. Marcus raised an eyebrow. I have a holding company. I said, Aurora Ridge Holdings. It is a private vehicle I use for special interest projects. I knew Aurora Ridge. It was a shell company I had incorporated in Delaware specifically for anonymous acquisitions. It had zero public link to the name Olivia Campbell. I am willing to underwrite the round. I continued, keeping my voice flat. But I do not want my name on the cap table. I want to route the capital through Summit Bridge. You act as the lead investor. You take the management fees. You take the public credit. But the money comes from Aurora Ridge. Marcus looked intrigued. He leaned forward. How much are we talking? He asked. I did the mental math. To fix the mess Lauren had made, to actually rebuild the tech stack from the ground up, and to give them enough runway to pivot into something real. They needed a war chest. $150 million. I said. The room went silent. Even Marcus, who moved billions, blinked. 150 million, he repeated. For a company you just said has a broken product, I am betting on the pivot. I lied, and I am betting that with the right control, the ship can be steered. Control, Marcus echoed. That is the key word. Exactly, I said. If Aurora Ridge is putting up $150 million, we dictate the terms, and the terms are going to be aggressive. I pulled a legal pad toward me and uncapped my pen. First, I said, writing as I spoke, Aurora Ridge takes 51% of the voting shares. We are the controlling interest. Marcus whistled. The founders are not going to like that. They will want to maintain control. They have 2 months of cash left. I said, tapping the financial statement in the folder. They do not have the luxury of liking it. It is this or bankruptcy. Second, I continued, we want full veto power on all strategic decisions, hiring, firing, acquisitions, and office expansions. Nothing happens without board approval. And third, Marcus asked. Third, I said, pressing the pen harder into the paper. A withdrawal clause. If the company fails to meet specific key performance indicators regarding revenue and technical stability for 2 consecutive quarters, Aurora Ridge reserves the right to liquidate assets and withdraw remaining capital immediately. It was a leash, a very short, very tight leash. Marcus looked at me with a newfound respect. He did not see the freelancer in the hoodie anymore. He saw a shark. You are ruthless. Olivia, he said, a smile touching his lips. I am protecting my investment. I said, can you structure the deal? We can. Marcus said, we will present it as a strategic partnership. Summit Bridge leads the round, backed by a private syndicate. Lauren Blake will never know the money is coming from her little sister. Make sure she does not. I said, that is the most important term. The next week was a blur of legal drafts and wire transfers. Moving $150 million is not like buying groceries. It requires layers of authentication and compliance. I liquidated positions in 3 other markets. I leveraged the equity in Nova Grid. I moved mountains of capital in silence, all while sitting in my pajamas in my home office. When the news broke, it was seismic. Summit Bridge Ventures leads $150 million Series B into Skyloop Labs. The tech blogs went wild. They called Lauren the Unicorn Queen. They validated everything she had ever said about herself. My phone buzzed during a family dinner that Friday. It was a notification from the bank confirming the final transfer. At the table, the mood was euphoric. My father had opened a bottle of champagne that cost $300. Lauren was glowing. She looked like she was floating 3 inches above her chair. Can you believe it? Lauren said, swirling her glass. $150 million. Summit Bridge sees the vision. They understand that we are not just building software. We are building an ecosystem. My mother was crying, clutching a napkin. I knew it, she sobbed. I knew you were special. Lauren, we all knew it. This proves everything. My father turned to me. He was flushed with wine and victory. You see this? Olivia, he said, pointing a finger at me. This is what real success looks like. This is the big leagues. Not fixing servers for pennies. Not those little contracts you do. I took a sip of my water. The water was cold. It is a lot of money. I said quietly, Did you read the terms? Lauren. Lauren waved her hand dismissively. Standard legal stuff, she said. They wanted a board seat and some oversight. But who cares? They gave us $150 million. That means they trust me. They trust my leadership. They trust the money. I thought, they trust the control. You should really learn from your sister. Olivia, my father continued. Relentless. Real investors know how to evaluate value. If Summit Bridge is putting in this kind of cash, it means Lauren is doing everything right. You could learn a thing or two about building trust with capital. I looked at him. I looked at the man who had told me to stop playing with computers. I looked at the sister who called me a pretend entrepreneur. They were celebrating their own shackles. They were toasting the very chain I had just wrapped around their necks. It is impressive. Lauren, I said, my voice steady, just make sure you hit the performance targets. Venture capital can be impatient. Lauren laughed. Oh, stop being such a worrier. Olivia, you sound like a compliance officer. We are going to crush the targets. We are going to the moon. Later that night, I drove home in my rattling sedan. The city lights blurred past me. I felt a strange hollowness. I had expected to feel triumphant. I owned them now. I owned the company that defined their identity. I was the invisible hand that would feed them or starve them. But as I walked into my silent apartment, I realized that revenge was not a hot, burning thing. It was cold. It was administrative. I sat down at my desk. My setup was modest 3 monitors, a mechanical keyboard, a ergonomic chair, no neon signs, no hustle posters. I opened my email. There was a message from Marcus at Summit Bridge. Subject executed documents. Skyloop Series B. Attachment shareholder agreement final, PDF. I downloaded the PDF. I scrolled to the signature page. There was Lauren's signature, large and looping, full of flourish, and right below it, the signature for the investor. Aurora Ridge Holdings, authorized signatory. I did not sign my name. My lawyer had signed it on my behalf. My anonymity was preserved in ink. I closed the PDF. I opened a spreadsheet program. I created a new file. I did not name it Victory. I did not name it Revenge. I typed the file name Skyloop. Risk scenarios. V. I started entering the columns. Column A, burn rate projection. Column B, technical debt assessment. Column C, trigger events for liquidation. I typed in the first row. Month 1 executive bloat. Lauren was popping champagne and dreaming of magazine covers. I was mapping out the exact mathematical coordinates of her destruction if she failed to listen to the silent partner she did not know she had. $150 million. It was not a gift. It was a test. And as I looked at the flashing cursor on my screen, I had a feeling she was going to fail it. But this time, when the crash came, I would not be the one cropped out of the picture. I would be the one holding the frame. 2 years is a long time in the life of a technology company. In 2 years, you can build an empire, or you can dig a grave so deep that you can never climb out of it. For Skyloop Labs, the last 24 months had been a masterclass in the latter. I watched it happen from the silence of my home office, one PDF file at a time. Skyloop had moved out of the co-working space and into a renovated industrial complex in the trendy arts district. They called it the Skyloop campus. According to the invoices that crossed my desk via Aurora Ridge Holdings, the renovation alone cost $2 million. They had polished concrete floors, glass-walled meeting rooms named after famous innovators, and a fully stocked kitchen that rivaled a high-end restaurant. They had hired a private chef to prepare organic lunches for the staff. They had installed nap pods that cost $8,000 apiece. It was the Silicon Valley Dream Package, transplanted to the East Coast. It was designed to signal success. To my parents and the local press, it looked like Skyloop had arrived. To me, looking at the balance sheets, it looked like a hemorrhage. Every month, on the 5th, I received the financial packet from the CFO of Skyloop. I would open the file, pour myself a cup of black coffee, and watch the numbers bleed red. The burn rate, the amount of cash the company was spending each month over and above its revenue was staggering. In the first year, it was $500,000 a month. By the middle of the second year, it had ballooned to $1.2 million a month. They were hiring aggressively, not engineers, but brand evangelists, content strategists, and partnership managers. Lauren was building an army of people to talk about the product, but she still had a skeleton crew actually building it. The metrics were terrifying. The customer acquisition cost, the money they spent on marketing to get a single person to sign up, was hovering around $400. The customer lifetime value, the total amount of money that person would pay before canceling, was averaging $150. You did not need a degree from Weston Business School to know that spending $400 to make $150 was not a business strategy. It was charity. I sat in on the board meetings remotely, represented by a proxy. I had hired a man named Elias Thorne to be the face of Aurora Ridge. Elias was a sharp-tongued corporate attorney who specialized in distressed assets. He was my voice in the room. I would give him a list of questions before every meeting, and I would listen to the audio recordings afterward. The recordings were a study in cognitive dissonance. Lauren would start the meetings with a slide deck that was a work of art. Bright colors, upward trending arrows, and buzzwords in bold font. User engagement is up 30% quarter over quarter, Lauren would say, her voice confident and smooth. Our social media mentions have doubled. The brand sentiment analysis is overwhelmingly positive. We are creating a movement. Then, I would hear the dry, scratching sound of Elias clearing his throat. That is all very promising. Lauren, Elias would say, reading the script I had prepared. But let us look at page 12. The churn rate. You are losing 20% of your paid subscribers every month. At this rate, you have to replace your entire customer base every 5 months just to stay flat. What is the strategy to stop the bleeding? There would be a pause. I could imagine Lauren shifting in her expensive ergonomic chair. The churn is a natural part of the early adoption cycle, Lauren would reply, using the deflection tactics she had perfected in Debate Club. We are filtering out the non-ideal users. We are refining our target demographic. Once we launch the version 2.0 features, those numbers will stabilize. And the marketing spend Elias would press. You spent $300,000 on influencer partnerships last month. We have tracked the conversion from those campaigns. It resulted in less than 50 paid subscriptions. That is a return on investment of near zero. It is about brand awareness. Lauren would snap, her tone sharpening. You cannot measure brand equity on a spreadsheet. Elias, we are planting seeds. We are not gardeners. Elias would reply coldly. We are investors, and right now, you are watering the concrete. I would listen to these exchanges, staring at my ceiling fan, feeling a mixture of frustration and vindication. She was not listening. She treated the $150 million not as capital that needed a return, but as an endowment that validated her existence. She thought the money was hers because she deserved it, not because she had a fiduciary duty to manage it. But I did more than just watch. I intervened. There were moments when Lauren's ambition threatened to kill the company instantly rather than slowly. 8 months ago, she had proposed acquiring a small, failing design firm in San Francisco for $10 million. She claimed Skyloop needed a West Coast presence to be taken seriously. I looked at the financials of the design firm. They were drowning in debt. It was a vanity purchase. Lauren wanted to fly to San Francisco and cut a ribbon. I sent an email to Elias. Veto the acquisition. Clause 4.2 of the shareholder agreement. Strategic disapproval. When Elias delivered the news, the backlash was immediate. Lauren called an emergency meeting. She ranted about how Aurora Ridge was stifling innovation, how we were micromanagers who did not understand the speed of the industry. If we do not expand, we stagnate, she had shouted in the boardroom. If you buy that debt, You are insolvent in 90 days. Elias had replied calmly. The answer is no. I saved her. I saved the company. And in return, at the next family dinner, I listened to her complain about the short-sightedness of her investors. We were eating roast chicken at my parents' house. Lauren looked tired, but she was wearing a new designer dress that likely cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. It is so frustrating, Lauren vented, pouring herself a large glass of wine. We have this massive war chest, but the board is so conservative. They are afraid of big moves. They do not understand that you have to burn fuel to reach escape velocity. My father shook his head sympathetically. That is the problem with finance people, he said, glancing at me as if I were part of the problem despite knowing nothing about my role. They only see the numbers today. They do not see the vision for tomorrow. You have to stay strong. Lauren, remember Amazon? They did not make a profit for years. That is the sign of a real giant. You are building infrastructure. Mom nodded enthusiastically. Exactly. Only the biggest companies can afford to lose money like that, she said, as if losing money was a badge of honor. It just shows how much trust they have in you. I cut into my chicken, keeping my eyes on my plate. The comparison to Amazon was the oldest cliché in the book. Amazon had high cash flow and reinvested it. Skyloop had low cash flow and set the rest on fire. I wanted to scream. I wanted to slam my hand on the table and say, she is not Amazon. She is a bonfire, and the only reason she still has a job is because I am the one holding the fire extinguisher. But I said nothing. I just chewed my food. So, Olivia, Lauren said, turning her gaze to me, still driving that old Honda. It runs fine, I said. You know, appearance matters, she said, her voice taking on that lecturing tone I hated. If you want to attract higher-tier clients for your freelance work, you should look the part. People judge your competence by your presentation. I almost laughed. My freelance work. That morning, before coming to dinner, I had signed a renewal contract with a global telecommunications firm. My company, NovaGrid, had just crossed the threshold into 8 figures of annual recurring revenue. I had 20 full-time employees now, all working remotely, all paid above market rate. I had diversified my personal portfolio into real estate, municipal bonds, and index funds. I could buy a fleet of Ferraris if I wanted to, but I liked my old Honda. It was invisible. Like me, I am comfortable. Lauren, I said, my clients judge me by the uptime of their servers, not the badge on my car. She rolled her eyes. Suit yourself. I just do not want you to get left behind while the rest of the world moves forward. Left behind. That night, back at my apartment, I sat in the dark, illuminated only by the glow of my 3 monitors. On the left screen, I had my personal dashboard open. The line graph was a steady, beautiful green slope, climbing upward at a 45-degree angle. My assets were growing. My liabilities were zero. NovaGrid was a fortress. On the right screen, I had the Skyloop dashboard open. It was a jagged, violent red line, trending downward like a plane that had lost its engines. I pulled up the latest cash flow projection. Based on the current burn rate of $1.4 million a month and the stagnant revenue growth, the intersection point was visible. I moved my cursor to the date on the x-axis where the red line would hit 0. 8 months, if nothing changed. In 8 months, the $150 million would be gone, vaporized into organic lunches, branding agencies, and the ego of a woman who thought she was too important to fail. I leaned back in my chair. The silence of the room felt heavy. I could stop it. I could order Elias to force a restructuring now. I could fire the marketing team. I could pivot the product. I could intervene and save maybe $40 million of the original investment. But I remembered the dinner table. I remembered the pretend entrepreneur comment. I remembered the way my father looked at me with disappointment and at her with adoration. They needed to see the bottom. They needed to hit the wall. You cannot save someone who thinks they are flying when they are actually falling. You have to wait until they hit the ground. I opened the spreadsheet titled Skyloop, Risk Scenarios, CSV. I added a new row, projected insolvency date. August 15th. I saved the file. I looked at the two screens one last time. The green line rising, the red line falling. They were destined to cross, and when they did, the silence I had lived in for 29 years was going to be broken by the loudest noise my family had ever heard. I closed the laptop. I went to bed. I slept soundly. While across town, the lights in the Skyloop office stayed on all night, burning electricity that I was paying for, illuminating an empty room where nobody was actually working. It was a Sunday evening in November, and the rain was coming down in sheets, hammering against the roof of my parents' house like a drum roll for an execution. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of pot roast and self-congratulation. Lauren had just returned from the Tech Horizon Summit in Boston. She was still wearing her lanyard. It swung from her neck like a medal of honor, the plastic badge catching the light of the dining room chandelier. It read, "Rising Star in Tech" in bold, sans serif letters. She had not taken it off since she walked through the door, and I suspected she planned to sleep in it. We were seated around the mahogany dining table, my parents, Lauren, myself, and Aunt Martha and Uncle Robert, who had driven over to hear the good news. The table was set with the good china, the plates usually reserved for Christmas or Thanksgiving. So there I was, Lauren said, gesturing with her fork, her eyes wide and animated. I was sitting on the panel right next to the founder of Nexus Stream, and the moderator turns to me and asks about the future of asynchronous collaboration. My mother gasped, pressing her hands to her cheeks. "What did you say?" she asked, breathlessly. "I told them that we are entering a post-location economy," Lauren declared. "I told them that Skyloop is not just a tool, it is a cultural operating system," and the whole room just went quiet. You could hear a pin drop. Then, when I finished, they erupted in applause. My father slapped the table, beaming. "That is my girl," he said, commanding the room. "That is what leadership looks like." I sat at the far end of the table, quietly cutting my roast beef into precise, 1-inch squares. I had read the transcript of that panel. I had access to the media monitoring tools that Aurora Ridge paid for. The room had gone quiet because Lauren had spoken for 4 minutes straight without answering the question, using so many buzzwords that the moderator had to awkwardly cut her off to keep on schedule. But at this table, truth was irrelevant. Only the performance mattered. "Did anyone ask about the user retention metrics?" I asked, keeping my voice low and even. The table went silent. Lauren stopped mid-chew and looked at me. Her expression shifted from radiant to annoyed, like I was a fly buzzing around her champagne glass. What she asked? "The retention metrics," I repeated, looking up from my plate. In the last board report, the churn rate was trending up. I was wondering if the investors at the conference asked about how you plan to stabilize the recurring revenue. My father sighed loudly, dropping his fork onto his plate with a clatter. "Here we go," he muttered. Lauren rolled her eyes, a gesture so practiced it seemed choreographed. "Olivia," she said, her tone dripping with condescension, "you always get stuck in the weeds." This was a visionary panel. We were discussing macro trends, not debugging code. Investors at this level do not care about a percentage point shift in monthly churn. They care about the narrative. They care about the rocket ship. "Actually," I said, "unit economics are usually the first thing." My father cut me off. "Enough. Olivia," he said sharply, "why do you always have to poke holes? Your sister is out there representing this family, rubbing shoulders with billionaires, and all you want to do is talk about spreadsheets. It is not just spreadsheets." "Dad," I said, "it is the business." "No," Lauren corrected me, pointing her knife in my direction. "It is the mechanics. That is the difference. Olivia, that is what you have never understood." She took a sip of wine, preparing for a lecture I had heard 1,000 times, but never with this much venom. "You think business is just input and output," she said. "You think it is just lines of code and server uptime. That is why you do what you do. That is why you are happy taking your little freelance contracts and fixing websites for dentists." I felt the muscles in my jaw tighten. I was currently managing the data architecture for a Fortune 500 logistics company, but to her, I was still fixing websites for dentists. Work at this level is different. Lauren continued, her voice rising with her confidence. You have to understand market dynamics. You have to manage investor psychology. You have to know how to wield capital as a weapon. It is an art form. Olivia, it is not something you can learn by staring at a monitor in your bedroom. My father nodded vigorously, pouring more gravy over his potatoes. She is right, he said. That is real business. What you do. Olivia, look, it is honest work. Nobody is saying it is not. But you cannot compare a freelancer's income to a corporation with a board of directors. It is just not the same league. You do not have the pressure. You do not have the stakes. I looked at them. I looked at my father, who had just lectured me about stakes while I was secretly underwriting the entire financial existence of the person sitting next to him. I looked at Lauren, who was lecturing me about managing capital while she unknowingly burned through mine at a rate of $50,000 a day. The irony was so dense it was almost hard to breathe. My mother reached out and patted my hand. Her touch was soft, but her words were the sharpest of the night. You know, Olivia, she said gently, her voice full of that terrible, suffocating pity. You should be grateful you have a sister like Lauren to look up to. Maybe, once Skyloop gets even bigger, Lauren can find a spot for you. Lauren laughed. A short, sharp sound. I do not know. Mom, she said, we have a pretty high bar for hiring. Oh, come on, my mother insisted. Maybe something in the IT support department? Or she could help manage the office network. It would be good for her to have a steady job, with benefits. You know, stop worrying about where the next check is coming from. I pulled my hand away from my mother's grasp. I do not need a job. I said, I am doing fine. Lauren leaned forward. The badge on her neck swung forward, dangling over her plate. She looked me dead in the eyes, and for the first time, I saw the insecurity beneath the arrogance. She needed me to be small so she could feel big. She needed me to be the failure so she could be the success. She smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. You are doing fine in your world. Olivia, she said, you are great at your little coding projects, but let us be honest. You are playing in the sandbox. She took a breath, savoring the moment. This, she said, gesturing to herself, to the badge, to the invisible empire she thought she built. This is the real world. You cannot just sit behind a laptop and call yourself a CEO because you filed some paperwork. The room was dead silent. Stop playing pretend entrepreneur. Olivia, she said, it is time to grow up. For a second, nobody moved. Then, Uncle Robert let out a nervous chuckle. My father grinned. That is a tough love, he said. But she needs to hear it. Someone has to tell her. My mother smiled apologetically. Lauren is just trying to help you. Dear, she said. I looked at Lauren. I looked at the badge. Rising star. Something inside me snapped. It was not a loud snap. It was not an explosion. It was a quiet, mechanical click, like a lock engaging. It was the sound of the last thread of familial guilt being severed. I had spent 2 years protecting her. I had spent $150 million keeping her afloat because I remembered the sister who used to share her ice cream with me when we were 6. I had vetoed the bad deals. I had covered the losses. I had let her play dress-up with my money because I wanted her to succeed, even if she didn't respect me. But she did not want to succeed. She wanted to rule, and she wanted to rule over me. I picked up my napkin and dabbed the corners of my mouth. I placed it gently on the table, next to my unfinished roast beef. I looked at Lauren. I did not blink. Understood. I said, my voice was so calm, so devoid of emotion, that Lauren faltered for a second. She expected me to cry. She expected me to argue. She expected a reaction she could dismiss as jealousy. Instead, I gave her nothing. I stood up. I should get going. I said, I have a busy week ahead. My father waved his hand dismissively. Running back to the computer, he teased, do not stay up too late playing your games. I walked out of the dining room. I walked down the hallway, past the framed photos of Lauren holding trophies, past the graduation pictures where I was out of focus in the background. I put on my coat. I walked out into the rain. I got into my car. The engine turned over with a rattle. I did not turn on the radio. I drove through the slick, dark streets of the suburbs, the windshield wipers slicing back and forth like a metronome. Click, clack, click, clack, stop playing. Okay, Lauren, I will stop playing. I arrived at my apartment 20 minutes later. I did not take off my coat. I walked straight to my office. The 3 monitors hummed to life, casting a blue glow over the room. I sat down. I did not check my email. I did not check the stock market. I opened the secure drive that housed the Aurora Ridge Holdings files. I navigated to the folder titled Portfolio Companies. I clicked on Skyloop Labs. I opened the folder titled Legal Agreements. There it was, the document I had drafted 2 years ago, the document Elias had fought to include. The document Lauren had signed without reading because she was too busy picking out the color of the office beanbag chairs. Series B Investor Rights Agreement. I opened the file. I scrolled down. Page 42, Section 9, Paragraph 3. My cursor hovered over the text. Termination Withdrawal Clause. In the event that the company fails to meet the agreed performance benchmarks for 2 consecutive fiscal quarters, the lead investor, Aurora Ridge Holdings, reserves the right to demand immediate repayment of principal capital and liquidate controlling assets to satisfy the debt. They had missed the benchmarks for 6 quarters in a row. I had let it slide. I had been the silent guardian, but the guardian was dead. The pretend entrepreneur was gone. I looked at the time. It was 9 o'clock on a Sunday night. I opened my email client. I composed a new message. The recipient was Elias Thorne. Subject Skyloop Labs. Notice of default. I typed the body of the email. It was 1 sentence. Execute Section 9.3 effective immediately. I did not send it yet. I wanted to wait until morning. I wanted the timestamp to be 9:00 a.m. sharp on Monday. I wanted her to be sitting in her office, sipping her organic coffee, looking at her rising star badge, when the world fell out from under her feet. I minimized the window. I looked at the risk scenario spreadsheet. I deleted the row that said, Projected Insolvency August. I typed a new entry, Liquidation Event Tomorrow. I sat back in my chair and listened to the rain hit the window. It was a peaceful sound. The game was over. The pretending was done. And tomorrow, my sister was going to learn the difference between a rising star and a falling rock. Monday morning arrived with a gray, suffocating stillness. The rain from the previous night had stopped, leaving the streets slick and dark. Inside my home office, the silence was absolute, broken only by the soft mechanical click of my keyboard. At exactly 8:45, I opened the draft I had prepared the night before. The recipient was Marcus at Summit Bridge Ventures. The subject line was Stark Directive Immediate Capital Withdrawal. Skyloop Labs. Series B. I read through the text one last time. It was a masterpiece of corporate detachment. There was no anger in it. There was no mention of Sunday dinner, or rising stars, or pretend entrepreneurs. It was simply a legal instrument designed to sever a limb. Dear Marcus, pursuant to Section 9.3 of the Investor Rights Agreement dated October 15, 2023, Aurora Ridge Holdings is hereby exercising its right to withdraw capital due to the portfolio company's sustained failure to meet the agreed performance benchmarks for 6 consecutive quarters. Please initiate the full liquidation of our position in Skyloop Labs. We require the return of all remaining principal and the immediate cessation of any further operational funding. The withdrawal must be completed within 7 business days. Regards, Authorized Signatory, Aurora Ridge Holdings. I hovered my finger over the mouse. This was not just an email. It was a demolition order. It was the button that would detonate the foundation of Lauren's life. I pressed send. The message vanished from my screen. It was done. 3 minutes later, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Marcus. Received. Initiating protocol. Are you sure this will kill the company? I typed back 2 words. Execute it. At 9:15, across town at the Skyloop campus, Lauren was likely walking into her office, holding a latte made with almond milk, perhaps admiring her badge one last time before hanging it on her lanyard. I opened the secure portal that allowed me to view the Summit Bridge calendar. I saw the invite go out. Emergency Board Meeting Strategic Review. Time, 10:00 a.m. East Tees. Attendees, Lauren Blake, CEO, Summit Bridge Partners, Board of Directors. I switched my audio feed to the conference line. As the majority shareholder, I had a listening port into every board meeting. Though I never spoke, I was the ghost in the machine. At 9:55, the audio feed crackled to life. I heard the shuffling of papers and the sound of chairs being pulled out. Lauren's voice came through, bright and slightly breathless. "Good morning, everyone," she said. "This was a bit short notice. I assume we are doing a pre-sync for the Series C funding round. I have some great updates from the Tech Horizon Summit. The feedback on our new roadmap has been incredible." There was a pause, a heavy, uncomfortable silence that stretched for 5 seconds. Then Marcus spoke. His voice was grave, stripped of the usual venture capital warmth. "Lauren, this is not a funding discussion," Marcus said. "Please sit down." I could hear the confusion in Lauren's voice. "Oh, okay. What is this about then?" Marcus cleared his throat. "We have received a formal directive from the controlling shareholder, Aurora Ridge Holdings," he said. "Based on the Q3 and Q4 financial reports, specifically the failure to reduce burn rate and improve customer retention, they are triggering the withdrawal clause." I heard a sharp intake of breath. It sounded like all the air leaving the room at once. What Lauren asked? Her voice was small, high-pitched. "What does that mean, withdrawal clause?" "It means," Marcus continued, his tone professional but lethal, "that they are pulling their capital, all of it. They are demanding a full divestment of their $150 million position, effective within 7 days. There was a sound of glass clinking against a table, perhaps Lauren putting down her water, or perhaps knocking it over. "You cannot do that," she said, her voice rising in panic. "You cannot just pull the money. We have vendors to pay. We have payroll next week. If you pull that capital, we are insolvent. We are aware of the implications," Marcus said. "But the contract is clear. The KPIs were not met. The grace period has expired. But we are building," Lauren shouted. The audio peaked, distorting her voice. "We are growing. I just told you. The summit was a success. You cannot kill a company because of a bad quarter. It has been 6 bad quarters." "Lauren," Marcus said, "and this is not our decision. Summit Bridge is the vehicle. Aurora Ridge is the driver, and they have lost confidence in the leadership and the product." "Who are they?" Lauren demanded. "Get them on the phone. I will talk to them. I will explain the vision. They clearly do not understand what we are building. They understand perfectly," Marcus replied, "and they have declined to meet. Their instruction is final." I sat in my chair, staring at the audio visualization on my screen. The waveform of Lauren's voice was jagged, chaotic. The waveform of Marcus's voice was flat, steady. It was a collision between emotion and arithmetic. The screen in the conference room, which I was viewing through a shared desktop link, changed slides. The title was simple, "Wind Down Liquidation Timeline." Lauren must have been looking at it. "You are shutting us down," she whispered. "You are actually shutting us down. We have to protect the remaining assets," Marcus said. "We will begin notifying staff tomorrow. We will look for a buyer for the IP. But given the market, it is unlikely we will recover much. This is insanity," Lauren stammered. $150 million. You are flushing it down the toilet." "No," Marcus said. "We are salvaging what is left before you burn the rest." I heard the sound of a chair being pushed back violently. "I am not accepting this," Lauren said. "I am going to fight this. My family put everything into this. My reputation is in this. Your family is a minority shareholder." "Lauren," Marcus said coldly, "you have no voting power here. Aurora Ridge owns 51%. They call the shots." "Who is Aurora Ridge?" Lauren screamed. "Who are they? Why are they doing this to me?" I leaned back in my chair. I took a sip of my coffee. It was lukewarm, because you told them to stop playing. I thought. The meeting ended 10 minutes later. There was no negotiation. There was no compromise. It was a sentencing hearing. By 11:30, the rumors had started. I saw the messages popping up on Blind. the anonymous tech worker app. Anonymous at Skyloop emergency board meeting just ended. CEO came out crying. CFO looks like he saw a ghost. Rumor is funding got pulled. Anonymous at Skyloop RIP. Check your options. Guys, they are worthless. Anonymous at Skyloop. I just bought a house. God help me. I watched the panic spread like a virus. It was cruel. I knew that. There were innocent people working there, developers, designers, support staff who were about to lose their jobs. I felt a pang of guilt for them. But I reminded myself that I had been paying their salaries for 2 years while Lauren played dress-up. If I kept it going, the end result would be the same, just later and more expensive. At noon, an email went out to the entire company from the board of directors. Subject: important company update. Team. Due to unforeseen shifts in our capital structure, Skyloop Labs will be commencing a strategic restructuring effective immediately. Please halt all external spending. It was the corporate equivalent of a death rattle. I turned off the audio feed. I closed the calendar. I sat in the silence of my office. The rain had started again, tapping against the window. My phone lay on the desk. It was quiet, but I knew it was coming. The shockwave was traveling from the Skyloop office, through the fiber optic cables, out to the suburbs, to my parents' house. Lauren would call them. She would be hysterical. She would tell them that a faceless monster named Aurora Ridge had destroyed her dream. She would tell them that the world was unfair, that she was a victim of short-sighted capitalists. My father would scream. My mother would cry. They would panic about their retirement money. And then, they would call a family meeting. They would need a savior. They would need someone with real money to step in and fight the monster. They would look for a hero, and they would never suspect that the monster and the hero were the same person, sitting in a hoodie, watching the rain. I stood up and walked to the window. The glass was cold against my forehead. The email had done its job. The $150 million was on its way back to me. The pretend entrepreneur had just executed the biggest trade of her life. I waited for the phone to ring. I waited for the storm to break. And for the first time in years, I felt completely, terrifyingly calm. The fallout from the withdrawal notice hit my parents' house like a bomb blast. By the time Friday evening arrived, the atmosphere in the living room was not just tense, it was hysterical. My mother had been crying on and off for 3 days, her eyes swollen and red, clutching a tissue as if it were a lifeline. My father was pacing back and forth across the Persian rug, his face a mask of righteous indignation, muttering about betrayal and corporate greed. They had called an emergency family meeting. The agenda was simple: save Skyloop, save the legacy, save Lauren. I arrived precisely on time, wearing my usual jeans and a plain gray sweater. I parked my rusting sedan behind my father's pristine SUV. When I walked inside, the air smelled of stale coffee and desperation. Lauren was sitting on the sofa. She looked like a ghost of the woman who had worn the Rising Star badge just 5 days ago. Her hair was pulled back in a severe, messy bun, and she was wearing sweatpants, which was shocking in itself. But despite the exhaustion etched into her face, she was still trying to hold court. She was still trying to play the CEO. It is just a liquidity crunch, Lauren was explaining to my parents, her voice raspy. It is a standard play by aggressive capital firms. They try to squeeze you out when you miss a few targets. It is predatory. Mom, they do not care about the vision. They just want to strip the assets. My father stopped pacing and slammed his fist into his open palm. It is criminal, he shouted. We trusted this Aurora Ridge. We thought they were partners. And now they pull the rug out because of a few bad quarters. Do they not understand that Amazon did not make a profit for years? Do they not understand that you are building the future? They are short-sighted. Dad, Lauren said, nodding. They are looking at spreadsheets, not potential. They see a burn rate. I see market capture. But they have the legal right. That is the problem. They control the board. My mother looked up, her voice trembling. But what can we do? Lauren, we cannot let them destroy everything you have worked for. We cannot let them take the company. We have to buy them out, Lauren said, or at least, We need to inject enough capital to keep operations running until I can find a white knight investor to take their place. We need a bridge. How much of a bridge? My father asked, reaching for his notepad. Lauren hesitated. She looked down at her hands. We need to cover payroll next week, and the server costs, and the lease, to stabilize the ship and get the vultures off our back. We need cash. Immediate cash. My father started writing. We can take a second mortgage on the house, he said, his voice firm with martyrdom. The equity has gone up. We could probably pull out $200,000. My mother nodded vigorously. And we have the vacation cabin at the lake, she added. We could sell it. It might take a month, but we could get a bridge loan against it. That is another $300,000. I sat in the armchair in the corner, watching this unfold with a cold, detached fascination. It was like watching people throw cups of water onto a forest fire. They were talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars. They did not understand that Skyloop was burning that amount every single week just to keep the lights on and the kombucha flowing. I spoke up, my voice cutting through the frantic planning. Dad, Mom, I said, you are talking about $500,000. The withdrawal notice is for $150 million. Even if you sell everything you own, you will not cover the interest on their debt, let alone the principal. My father whipped around to face me, his eyes narrowing. We are doing something. Olivia, he snapped. We are fighting for your sister. We are not just sitting there criticizing like you always do. Every little bit helps. It shows commitment. It shows we believe in her. It is not about belief, I said calmly. It is about arithmetic. You are going to bankrupt yourselves for a company that has already failed. Do not say that my mother cried out. It has not failed. Lauren says it is just a stumble. Lauren looked at me with pure hatred. You would love that, wouldn't you? She spat. You would love to see me fail. You have always been jealous. Olivia, you sit there with your little freelance money and your safe little life, and you judge people who actually take risks. I am not judging. I said, I am reading the balance sheet. You cannot fix a $150 million hole with a second mortgage. Lauren stood up, her hands shaking. You just do not get it, she said, her voice rising. This company is not just about money. It is a symbol. It is our family's name. If Skyloop goes under, we all look like fools. I need a partner who understands that. She paced the room, gesturing wildly. We need a savior, she said. We need a whale. We need someone with real money. Someone who understands deep tech and has the liquidity to write a check for $50 or $100 million without blinking. That is the only thing that stops Aurora Ridge. My father nodded solemnly. We will find them. Honey, he said, we will call everyone. I will call my golf buddies. Maybe Mr. Henderson from the bank knows someone. Lauren let out a bitter, mocking laugh. Dad, Mr. Henderson manages retirement accounts. I am talking about institutional capital. I am talking about private equity. I am talking about the kind of money that moves markets. She turned her gaze back to me, her eyes narrowing into slits. But of course, she said, her voice dripping with venom, that kind of money does not exist in your world. Olivia, you think a good month is $5,000 fixing a website? You have no concept of the scale I'm dealing with. People with $50 million do not sit in their bedrooms with laptops. They are in boardrooms. They are in New York. They are in places you will never be invited to. I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had spent her entire life convincing everyone she was the sun, while I was just a shadow. She was standing there, asking for a miracle, and in the same breath, she was spitting on the only person who could grant it. The irony was so perfect it felt scripted. I uncrossed my legs. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. If there was someone like that in this room, I asked quietly, what would happen? The room went quiet for a second. Then, a wave of awkward tension washed over them. My father looked at me with deep embarrassment. Lauren looked at me with disgust. My mother tried to smooth it over, offering a pitying smile. Oh, Olivia, she said softly, we know you want to help. But this is not like crowdfunding for a little app. This is big finance. It is sweet of you to imagine, but let us be realistic. Lauren shook her head, looking at the ceiling as if praying for patience. Stop it, Olivia, she said. This is not the time for your fantasies. We are talking about $100 million. Do you even know how many zeros that is? Go back to your coding. Let the adults handle the crisis. I did not put the phone away. I unlocked the screen. I scrolled through my contacts. I tapped on a name, Ethan. North Shore Capital. Senior advisor. I pressed the call button. I pressed the speaker icon. I held the phone out in the center of the room, resting it on the coffee table amidst the scattered papers of my parents' financial ruin. The line rang once, twice, then a clear, crisp male voice filled the room. Hello, Ms. Campbell. This is Ethan. To what do I owe the pleasure on a Friday evening? I leaned forward slightly, ignoring the confused looks from my family. Hi, Ethan, I said, my voice steady and cool. I apologize for the late call. I am in the middle of a family discussion, and I need to check on my liquidity position, of course. Ethan replied instantly. The tone was deferential, professional. The voice of a man speaking to his most important client. What do you need to know? I need to know if I have the capacity to execute a direct equity injection. I said, I am looking at a distressed asset. I would need to mobilize cash quickly. My father frowned, opening his mouth to say something, likely to tell me to stop playing pranks. But something in Ethan's voice made him pause. Certainly, Ethan said. What is the target range? I looked at Lauren. She was staring at the phone, her brow furrowed. About $150 million. I said. The room went dead silent. My mother gasped. Lauren froze. Ethan did not laugh. He did not ask if I was joking. I could hear the sound of typing on a keyboard in the background. 150 million, Ethan repeated. Let me just pull up the current allocation. The typing continued for 3 seconds. 3 seconds that felt like an eternity. Okay, here we are, Ethan said, looking at the main portfolio and the liquid reserves. Yes, that is not a problem. Ms. Campbell, with the current valuation of Novagrid and your diversified holdings, 150 million represents approximately 7 to 8% of your total assets under management. My father stopped breathing. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. Lauren's face drained of all color, turning a sickly shade of gray. 7%. I repeated. Correct, Ethan said. We can structure that from the cash reserves and a minor liquidation of the municipal bond index. We would not even need to touch the core equity positions. I can have the wire prepared by Monday morning if you give the order. I nodded, though he could not see me. Thank you. Ethan, I said, that is helpful. My family was frozen. They were looking at me as if I had just grown a second head. They were looking at a stranger. The girl in the gray sweater was gone. In her place was a titan they had never bothered to notice, but I was not done. There is one more thing. Ethan, I said, yes. Ms. Campbell. I want to verify my current standing regarding a specific holding. I said, the entity is Aurora Ridge Holdings. Yes, Ethan said, your private holding company. I watched Lauren. Her eyes widened. Her mouth opened slightly. But no sound came out. She was putting it together. The pieces were falling into place, crashing down like rubble. Can you confirm for me? I asked, locking eyes with my sister, what Aurora Ridge's current position is in Skyloop Labs. Ethan's voice came through the speaker, clear as a bell. One moment, Ethan said. Ah, yes, here it is. Aurora Ridge Holdings is the majority shareholder of Skyloop Labs. You hold 51% of the voting stock and controlling interest, acquired during the Series B round via Summit Bridge Ventures. The silence that followed was not just quiet, it was a vacuum. It sucked the air out of the room. So, I said, I am the controlling party. That is correct, Ethan said. You have full veto power and liquidation rights. You are the owner. Ms. Campbell. Thank you. Ethan, I said, I will let you know on Monday if we proceed with the withdrawal. Have a good weekend. You too. Ms. Campbell. I tapped the red button. The call ended. I sat back in my chair. I looked at my father, who was clutching the edge of the table so hard his knuckles were white. I looked at my mother, who was trembling. And finally, I looked at Lauren. She was not moving. She was staring at the black screen of my phone on the coffee table. Her chest was heaving up and down in short, shallow gasps. She looked like she had been punched in the gut. The realization was washing over her. The anonymous investor, the $150 million, the vetoed acquisitions, the pretend entrepreneur who sat in her bedroom. It was all me. I picked up my phone and slipped it back into my pocket. I did not smile. I did not gloat. I just looked at her with the same flat professional expression I used for my code reviews. "So," I said softly into the silence, "it seems the person with the real money was in the room after all." Nobody spoke. The only sound in the room was the terrified, jagged breathing of my sister. Realizing that the game she thought she was winning had been owned by me the entire time, Lauren stared at the phone on the coffee table as if it were a radioactive isotope. Her hands were trembling so violently that when she reached out to grab it, she knocked over a coaster. She snatched the device up, bringing it to her ear with a desperation that was painful to watch. "Ethan," she demanded, her voice cracking. "This is Lauren Blake, CEO of Skyloop Labs." I watched her. I did not move to stop her. I did not flinch. I simply folded my hands in my lap and waited. Ethan's voice was audible even without the speakerphone, tinny but distinct in the dead silence of the living room. "Hello, Ms. Blake," Ethan replied. Lauren took a breath, trying to summon the command she usually wielded in boardrooms, but it came out brittle. "I need you to clarify something," she said, her eyes darting to me and then back to the floor. "My sister, Olivia Campbell, she claims to be a client of yours. She claims to have access to institutional capital. Is this some kind of mistake? Is she an authorized user on someone else's account?" I saw my father lean forward, hope flickering in his eyes. He wanted it to be a mistake. He wanted me to be lying. He wanted the world to make sense again, where I was the failure and Lauren was the star. "No mistake. Ms. Blake," Ethan said, his tone patient but firm. "Ms. Campbell is one of our primary private clients. She is the sole beneficial owner of the account." Lauren swallowed hard. "And Aurora Ridge Holdings?" she asked, the name tasting like ash in her mouth. She claims she owns it. She does not just own it," Ethan said. "She is Aurora Ridge Holdings. It is a single-member LLC disregarded for tax purposes, fully owned by Olivia Campbell. The capital structure is direct." Lauren squeezed her eyes shut. "So when Summit Bridge invested, Summit Bridge was the lead syndicate partner," Ethan explained, delivering the final blow with professional courtesy. "But the capital call was satisfied by Aurora Ridge. Ms. Campbell underwrote the entire Series B round. She holds 51% of the voting shares, giving her controlling interest in Skyloop Labs. Is there anything else I can clarify?" Lauren lowered the phone slowly. She did not hang up. She just let her hand drop to her side, the screen going dark. "Ethan," I said calmly. "Yes, Ms. Campbell." His voice came from her hip. "You can hang up now. Thank you." The line clicked dead. The silence that followed was physical. It felt like the air pressure in the room had dropped, popping our ears. The rain outside seemed to stop, or maybe we just stopped hearing it. My mother was the first to break. She looked at me, her eyes wide, brimming with a confusion so deep it looked like physical pain. "Olivia," she whispered. "What? What does this mean?" "You are the investor. You are the one who gave Lauren the money." I looked at her. "I am." I said, "I am the one who authorized the transfer of $150 million to Skyloop Labs 2 years ago, and I am the one who signed the directive to withdraw it on Monday morning." My father stood up. His face was a mottled red, a mix of fury and bewilderment. He looked at the rusting sedan in the driveway, then at my plain sweater, and then at me. From where, he demanded, his voice shaking. "From where?" "Olivia. You fix computers. You do freelance jobs. Where in God's name do you get $150 million? Did you steal it? Is this illegal? I almost laughed, even now, faced with the reality of my wealth. His first instinct was to assume criminality rather than competence. It is not illegal. Dad, I said, and I do not fix computers. I have not fixed a computer since I was 19. Then what he shouted, "What is it I own? Nova Grid Systems," I said. He blinked. Nova, what Nova Grid Systems? I repeated, "It is a back-end infrastructure firm. We handle data architecture, legacy migration, and high-frequency compliance protocols for enterprise clients." I listed the names. We built the logistics tracking system for global way shipping. We maintain the secure transaction layer for Atlantic Regional Bank. We handle the inventory grid for 3 of the largest pharmaceutical distributors in the country. My father's mouth opened, but no sound came out. I do not charge by the hour. Dad, I continued, my voice hard. I charge by the contract, and my contracts start at 7 figures. I have been aggregating capital for a decade. I invested in real estate. I invested in markets. And 2 years ago, I invested in Skyloop. Lauren made a sound like a wounded animal. She slumped back onto the sofa, burying her face in her hands. Why she moaned. She looked up, her face streaked with tears, her expression twisting into a grimace of humiliation. "Why did you not say anything?" she screamed. "Why did you hide it? You let me sit here. You let us talk to you like you were nothing. You let me brag about money that was yours." She stood up, pointing a trembling finger at me. "You are sick, Olivia. This is sick. You were playing a game with us. You were laughing at us the whole time, playing power games from the shadows." I stood up too. I did not shout. I did not need to. My silence had been loud for years. Now my voice was thunder. I was not playing a game. "Lauren," I said, "I was protecting you. Protecting me." She scoffed. "You humiliated me. I hid it because I knew exactly what would happen if I told you." I said, "I knew that if you knew the money came from me, you would never have taken it. Your ego would not allow it. You needed the validation of a stranger. You needed Summit Bridge and the fancy board meetings to feel real. If I had handed you a check at the kitchen table, you would have torn it up." I looked at my parents, and I did not want this family to change. I added, "I did not want Sunday dinner to turn into a shareholder meeting. I wanted to be your daughter, not your bank. I wanted to believe that you could love me and respect me without knowing my net worth." I paused, letting that sink in. "I wanted to see if you could see me." I said, "Just me? The girl in the hoodie? I wanted to see if that girl was enough for you." My mother began to sob openly. She put her hand over her mouth, rocking back and forth, but she was not enough. Was she? I asked. I turned back to Lauren. I believed in the idea. "Lauren, I really did. I saw the potential in Skyloop, even when the code was garbage. I thought if I gave you the runway, if I gave you the capital you claimed you needed, you would grow into the CEO you pretended to be. I gave you 2 years. I gave you $150 million. I vetoed the bad acquisitions you tried to make. I kept the lights on while you bought beanbag chairs and hired vibe managers." Lauren flinched with every sentence. "I was your silent partner." I said, "I was the best partner you ever had. I asked for nothing. I took no credit. I let you stand on the stage and accept the awards." "Then why?" Lauren whispered. "Why pull it now? Why destroy it?" "Because of last Sunday," I said. Lauren froze. "When you looked me in the eye and told me to stop playing pretend entrepreneur," I said, my voice dropping an octave. "You sat there, wearing a badge paid for by my dividends, eating food bought with my capital, and you called me a fraud. You told me I did not understand real business. You told me I was playing in a sandbox." I took a step toward her. "You were not insulting a freelancer. Lauren, you were insulting the majority shareholder of your company. You were insulting the person who owned 51% of your professional existence. And you were insulting the only person in the world who was willing to lose money to keep your dream alive." My father sank into a chair. He looked old. He looked defeated. "Olivia," he stammered, We did not know. We just wanted you to have stability. Stability, I repeated. I looked at my father. Do you remember when I bought this car? I pointed to the window. You asked me if I could afford the insurance. That same month, I closed a deal worth $12 million. I looked at my mother. Do you remember when you offered to ask Lauren to give me a job in IT support? A stable job. I was generating more profit in a quarter than Skyloop has generated in its entire history. I looked at Lauren. And you? You told me that people with real money do not sit in bedrooms. You were right. I do not just sit in my bedroom. I sit on your board of directors. Every memory, every slight, every condescending remark hung in the air between us. Pocket money, freelance for fun. Maybe you can be a technician. Stop playing. They were not just insults anymore. They were indictments of their own blindness. They had looked at a diamond and called it glass because it was not in a Tiffany box. Lauren wiped her face. Her eyes were hard now, defensive, cornered. So that is it, she said, her voice trembling with rage. You ruined me because I hurt your feelings. You burned down a company employing 100 people because of a dinner conversation. That is not business. Olivia, that is petty. That is exactly why you are not a leader. Leaders do not act on emotion. I smiled. It was a cold, sharp smile. You still do not get it. I said. I reached into my bag and pulled out my laptop. I set it on the dining table. Pushing aside the notepad where my father had been calculating second mortgage rates, I opened the lid. The screen glowed in the dim room. I pulled up a file. This is not about feelings. Lauren, I said, this is about performance. I turned the laptop around so they could see the screen. It was the cap table, the capitalization table of Skyloop Labs. It showed the equity distribution. At the top, in a large blue block, was the entity Aurora Ridge Holdings. Ownership 51.1%. Voting rights controlling. And right next to it, in the column marked Beneficial Owner, was the name they had refused to respect for 29 years. Oh, Campbell. Below that, I had opened a second window. It was the Skyloop risk scenarios spreadsheet I had built. I pointed to the data. I did not pull the funding because I was mad. I said, I pulled it because you are insolvent. You have missed your KPIs for 6 quarters. Your customer acquisition cost is triple your lifetime value. You are burning cash on vanity metrics. I scrolled down to the bottom of the sheet. I kept you alive because you were my sister. I said, that was the emotional decision. That was the mistake. Keeping the money in was the act of a sister. Pulling it out, I looked her dead in the eyes. That is the act of a CEO. That is the act of a real entrepreneur protecting her capital from a bad investment. Lauren stared at the screen. She stared at her name, small and insignificant below mine. She stared at the math that proved she was failing. You told me to stop playing, I said softly. So I did. I stopped playing sister. Now I am just your investor. And as your investor, I am telling you that your time is up. Lauren looked at the screen, then at me. Her lips parted, her breath coming in short, sharp hitches. She looked for an argument, a defense, a way to spin the narrative. But there was no narrative here. There was only data, and the data said she belonged to me. She slumped forward, her forehead touching the cool surface of the table, right next to the laptop that contained the proof of her undoing. Please, she whispered, her voice muffled. Please, Olivia. I closed the laptop with a soft, final click. The meeting is adjourned, I said. Monday morning at the Skyloop Labs headquarters felt less like a place of business and more like a wake. The open plan office, usually buzzing with the performative energy of people trying to look busy, was hushed. The ping-pong table sat unused. The espresso machine hissed loudly in the silence. Groups of employees stood in tight knots near the windows, whispering, their eyes darting toward the glass-walled conference room at the far end of the floor. I walked through the double glass doors at 9:55. I was wearing a dark gray raincoat over a plain black sweater and jeans. With my usual worn-out sneakers, I carried a backpack that contained my laptop. I did not look like a savior. I did not look like an executioner. I looked like I was there to fix the printer. A young man with a perfectly groomed beard and a Skyloop branded t-shirt stepped in front of me, holding up a hand. "Excuse me," he said, his voice tight with stress. "We are in a lockdown mode right now. No vendors. Are you here for the Wi-Fi?" "Because we really cannot deal with an outage today." I looked at him. I recognized him from the payroll files I had audited. He was the community manager. He made $85,000 a year to post emojis on Twitter. "I am not here for the Wi-Fi," I said quietly. "I am here for the board meeting." He blinked, looking me up and down with a mix of confusion and dismissal. "The board meeting," he repeated. "Look, miss, the board meeting is for executives and investors. The IT closet is down the hall to the left. If you are not on the list, you need to leave." I did not argue. I did not pull a pretty woman moment and tell him he made a huge mistake. I just stepped around him. "I am on the list," I said, not looking back. I walked the length of the office. I could feel the eyes on me. They were wondering who the girl in the sneakers was. They were wondering if I was an auditor, or perhaps a liquidator sent to tag the furniture. I reached the main conference room. The blinds were partially drawn, but I could see the silhouettes inside. I pushed the heavy glass door open and stepped in. The room went silent. Lauren was sitting at the head of the table. She looked like she had aged 10 years in 48 hours. Her skin was pale, her eyes rimmed with red. Though she had tried to cover it with concealer, she was wearing a sharp navy suit, armor for a battle she had already lost. To her right sat Marcus from Summit Bridge. To her left was the CFO, a man named David, who looked like he was about to be sick. Elias Thorne, my lawyer, was sitting at the far end. When I walked in, Lauren looked up. Her expression was a painful collision of hope and horror. For a split second, she looked relieved to see her sister, perhaps thinking I had come to offer emotional support. Then she remembered Sunday night. She remembered the phone call, and the relief curdled into fear. "Olivia," she whispered. Marcus stood up immediately. He buttoned his suit jacket, a gesture of respect. "Good morning, Miss Campbell," Marcus said, his voice booming in the quiet room. The CFO, David, looked confused. He looked from Marcus to me, then back to Marcus. "Ms. Campbell?" David asked. "You mean Lauren's sister? The one who does the—" Consulting Marcus turned to the room. He did not smile. "Gentlemen, Lauren," Marcus said formally, "please allow me to introduce the majority shareholder of Skyloop Labs. This is Olivia Campbell, the sole owner of Aurora Ridge Holdings." The air left the room. David's jaw literally dropped. He looked at my sneakers. He looked at my backpack. He looked at the girl he had likely ignored at the launch party. "You," David stammered, "you are Aurora Ridge." I pulled out the chair at the opposite end of the table from Lauren. I sat down. I placed my backpack on the floor and my laptop on the table. "Good morning, everyone," I said. My voice was level, devoid of the trembling that was shaking Lauren's hands. "Let us begin." Lauren stared at me. She did not know how to address me. In this room, was I her little sister? Was I the girl she told to stop playing pretend? Or was I the entity that held the knife to her throat? "Olivia, Ms. Campbell," Lauren stammered, correcting herself mid-word. It sounded wrong in her mouth. We did not expect you to be here in person. We thought we would be dealing with Elias. I am done dealing through proxies." "Lauren," I said, "we are here to discuss the insolvency of this company and the restructure of my capital." Lauren swallowed hard. She clasped her hands on the table, trying to regain her CEO persona. She sat up straighter, but it looked like a marionette being pulled by strings. "Right," she said, "the withdrawal notice. Look, I have been running the numbers all weekend. If Aurora Ridge follows through with the withdrawal, we are finished. We cannot cover the burn rate." "I know," I said. "I wrote the notice." Lauren leaned forward, desperation leaking through her professional mask. "We can negotiate," she said. "We can work this out. If you just give us more time, I can cut costs. I can fire the marketing team. I can pivot the roadmap. Just do not pull the money. Please, for the sake of the vision." I opened my laptop. The screen glowed, illuminating my face. I did not look at her. I looked at the data. The vision is not the problem. Lauren, I said coldly, the execution is the problem. I tapped a key, casting my screen onto the large monitor on the wall. It was a forensic dissection of Skyloop's failure. I pulled up a chart. Problem 1, I said. You spent $4 million on brand positioning before you had a stable beta. You hired a chief vibe officer before you hired a lead security engineer. I clicked to the next slide. Problem 2. I continued. Your technical debt. I reviewed the repository personally last night. Your core architecture is built on unscalable spaghetti code. You have been patching leaks instead of building a foundation. You promised investors a proprietary AI engine. What you actually have is a series of nested if-then statements wrapping a third-party API. David, the CFO, went white. He looked at Lauren. You told the board the AI was proprietary. David whispered. Lauren flushed red. It is proprietary in its application, she defended. Her voice shrill. The code is not the point. The user experience is the point. I cut her off. Problem 3. I said, leadership. The room went deadly still. You have ignored 6 consecutive quarters of board guidance, I said, looking directly at her. You dismissed concerns about churn rate as noise. You treated the capital I provided not as an investment to be nurtured, but as an allowance to be spent. You built a culture of arrogance instead of a culture of product. Lauren's eyes filled with tears. I did my best. She choked out. I built this brand from nothing. Everyone knows Skyloop because of me. They know the logo. I said, they do not use the product. I closed the presentation. I folded my hands on the table. I am not going to pull the capital, I said. Lauren's head snapped up. Hope, wild and irrational, flooded her face. You are not, she asked. You are going to let us keep the money. I am not withdrawing the $150 million, I clarified. Because if I do, the company dies today, and I lose everything. I am not in the business of losing money. I slid a document across the table toward her. It was thick, stapled, and final. However, I said, I am not leaving the money in your hands either. Lauren looked at the document. She looked at the title. Corporate Restructuring and Leadership Transition Plan. What is this? She whispered. It is the new way forward. I said, Aurora Ridge is exercising its controlling interest to restructure the board and the executive team. I pointed to the paper. Effective immediately. You are removed from the position of Chief Executive Officer. Lauren gasped. It was a sound like she had been physically struck. You cannot do that, she said. This is my company. I founded it. You own 12% of it. I corrected. I own 51%. I can do it. And I just did. I continued, my voice relentless. We are bringing in a new CEO. His name is Robert Chen. He has 30 years of experience scaling SaaS platforms. He does not care about magazine covers. He cares about unit economics. He starts on Wednesday. And me? Lauren asked, her voice trembling. You are firing me, no. I said, I am not that cruel. You have value. Lauren, you are good at talking to people. You are good at the vision. You just are not good at the operations. I pointed to the second paragraph. You will remain as Chief Product Officer. You will report to Robert. You will have no budget authority. You will have no hiring authority. You will focus exclusively on the user interface and the brand voice. Lauren stared at me. Her face twisted in a mixture of shock and humiliation. You are demoting me, she hissed. In my own company, you are making me report to some guy you hired. I'm giving you a job. I said, and I am saving your equity. If I pull the money, your 12% is worth 0. If we restructure, and Robert turns this ship around, your 12% might actually be worth something one day. Lauren stood up, slamming her hands on the table. No, she screamed. I will not do it. I will not let you humiliate me like this. You are doing this out of spite. She looked at Marcus, begging for an ally. Marcus, tell her she cannot do this. This is hostile. Marcus looked down at his notepad. He did not make eye contact with her. It is a valid motion. Lauren, Marcus said quietly, Summit Bridge supports the restructuring. We agree with Ms. Campbell's assessment. The current leadership trajectory is unsustainable. Lauren looked at Elias. Elias just shrugged, clicking his pen. She turned back to me, tears streaming down her face. You are punishing me, she sobbed. You are punishing me because I made fun of your little freelance job. You are punishing me because I was the favorite. This is revenge. It is petty, ugly revenge. I stood up. I walked around the table until I was standing right next to her. I looked down at her. I saw the sister I used to worship. I saw the bully who had made me feel small for 20 years. No, Lauren, I said softly. Revenge would be withdrawing the money, bankrupting the company, and watching you explain to Mom and Dad why you lost their retirement fund. That would be revenge. I tapped the document on the table. This is mercy. I leaned in closer. I am saving your idea from your ego, I said, and I am saving my $150 million from your incompetence. You treated that money like it was a toy. I am treating it like a business. I walked back to my chair. We are voting now, I said. I looked at Marcus. How does Summit Bridge vote in favor? Marcus said immediately. I looked at Elias. Aurora Ridge votes in favor. I said, the motion carries. I announced. I looked at Lauren. She was standing there, shaking, stripped of her title, stripped of her power, stripped of the illusion she had wrapped herself in. Sign the addendum. Lauren, I said, or resign and walk away with nothing. She looked at the pen on the table. She looked at the door. For a moment, I thought she might run. I thought she might have enough pride to leave. But Lauren loved the spotlight too much to leave the stage, even if she was no longer the star. She sat down slowly. She picked up the pen. Her hand shook so badly that the signature was barely legible, but she signed it. She pushed the paper away, looking defeated, broken. The room was silent. The heavy lifting was done. The coup was complete. I packed my laptop into my backpack. I zipped it up. The sound was loud in the quiet room. I stood up to leave. Marcus stood up with me. Thank you. Ms. Campbell, he said. We will coordinate the transition with Robert immediately. I nodded. Keep me posted on the burn rate. Marcus, I want to see it under control in 30 days. Understood. I turned to the door. Lauren spoke. Her voice was a whisper, rough and hollow. Olivia. I stopped. I turned back. She was looking at me, her eyes searching my face, trying to find the sister she thought she knew. What are you? She asked. Are you the person who destroyed me? Or the person who saved me? I looked at her. I looked at the rising star badge that was lying on the table, discarded and dull. I thought about the dinner. I thought about the pretend entrepreneur comment. I thought about the years of silence. You are the one who told me I was pretending. Lauren, I said. I gestured to the room, to the expensive glass walls, to the people outside who were keeping their jobs because of my checkbook. Today, you are sitting in a chair paid for by my money. You are working in a company that my game bought, managed, and just restructured. You are reporting to a CEO that I hired. I hoisted my backpack onto my shoulder. Call it destruction. Call it salvation. Call it whatever helps you sleep at night. I walked to the door, but stop calling it pretend. I pushed the door open and walked out. The office was still quiet, but the atmosphere had shifted. The employees were no longer whispering. They were watching. They watched the girl in the sneakers and the gray coat walk past them. They did not look at me like I was IT support anymore. They did not look at me like I was a vendor. They looked at me with a mixture of fear and awe. They knew. The word had spread. They knew that the power in the room did not wear a suit. It did not give speeches. It did not need a badge. I walked to the elevator. I pressed the button. As the doors slid shut, I caught one last glimpse of the conference room. Lauren was still sitting there, head in her hands, a small figure in a big chair. The elevator descended. I walked out of the lobby and into the cool, gray afternoon. The rain had stopped. The air was crisp and clean. I got into my rusting sedan. I turned the key. The engine rattled. A familiar, comforting sound. I drove away from the Skyloop campus. I did not look back. I had a meeting with a client in 20 minutes. A logistics firm needed a new database architecture. It was boring work. It was unglamorous. It was invisible. And it was exactly where I belonged. Behind me, on the glass door of the conference room, the reflection of the city skyline shimmered, and below it, the small metal plaque remained, catching the light. Boardroom. Authorized partners only. I was authorized. I was the partner. And nobody, not my sister, not my parents, not the world, would ever dare to say I was just playing again. Thank you so much for listening to this story of silence, strategy, and the ultimate clapback. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. Are you listening from a bustling city, a quiet room, or maybe your own startup office? Please let me know in the comments below to connect and share your thoughts. If you enjoyed seeing Olivia take her power back, please subscribe to the Maya Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit the hype button so this story can reach even more people who need to be reminded that the quietest person in the room is often the most powerful.